Good evening, everyone. We are here again at the First Church of the Open Bible. And this evening we are doing mindfulness. I just want to start with prayer, and then I'll introduce our speaker. Father God, Abba Father, our Father, we thank you for this evening, dear God. We thank you that we have come another evening to sit in your presence and to hear from a speaker, from one of our speakers, so that we will be able to work with the mentally challenged and those persons who need that service. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you, dear God, that you will, your word says that you will ensure that whatever is done to your honor and your glory. So, Father, this evening as we go through, he said, give the speaker, we ask that you bless the speaker, dear God. Give him that authority, dear God, to make the presentation so meaningful that those who need to use whatever they need to use from that presentation, they'll be able to do it and know exactly what they should do so that they could work with who God would have placed them to work with. Father, we thank you and we say, God, have your way this evening in this place. For those who are online, we welcome you. And on any other platform, we say, just be with us for another 3/4 of an hour now, so that we can do what God would have placed us to do. Thank you very much. I want at this time to introduce our speaker, Keshawn Lachman. And this young man holds a Master of Science degree in clinical psychology from the University of the West Indies. In addition to counseling, he conducts psychological testing, assessments for children and adults, which help persons better understand their challenges and work towards effective treatment intervention. Keshawn has also practiced mindfulness for over 15 years, and currently he teaches mindfulness for emotional wellness across various platforms. So this evening we want to welcome you again as I ask Keshawn to please come, and as he begins the session, please welcome him wherever you are. Let's welcome him. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister. Today we're going to be talking about mindfulness. But before we get started, I just wanted to read sort of a passage of quote written by Mother Teresa from the book called Something Beautiful for God. And it's really a beautiful kind of a passage that's going to help us to sort of anchor this evening's session. So it's quoted, "We need to find God, and he cannot be found in noise and restlessness. God is the friend of silence. See how nature, trees, flowers, grass grows in silence. See the stars, the moon, and the sun, how they move in silence. The more we receive in silent prayer, the more we can give in our active life. We need silence to be able to touch souls. The essential thing is not what we say, but what God says to us and through us. All our words will be useless unless they come from within. Words which do not give the light of Christ increase the darkness. Such a beautiful passage by Mother Teresa, and it really talks about finding that silence and finding that inner stillness to be able to connect to our deeper and truer nature and to be able to connect with God. So we get started with mindfulness. In our daily lives, there's so much chaos that we sort of experience. We experience a lot of chaos in our minds, in our communities. We are so busy. We have so many things that we're doing, that we're expected to get done. And so our mind is constantly occupied over and over and over again. And sometimes it's difficult to find that stillness. Sometimes it's difficult to find back that peace. And so we're going to kind of look at mindfulness as a nice sort of a platform, a nice sort of a skill, but really our ability to be able to rediscover that ability to be able to find back that stillness. So we're going to start with a little definition of mindfulness. And so it's very simple. So a simple definition of mindfulness is it's a means of paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. What that means is that it allows us to be able to pay attention, to be able to have that ability to refocus our attention to something in that present moment. And we're doing that in a way that's non-judgmental, in a very gentle way that we're re-guiding the mind back into that space. Right, so we're having a little trouble with the slideshow. That's all right. So I'm gonna, as soon as it cooperates, we'll continue there. But I want to just talk a little bit about mindfulness. Mindfulness is not new to us. It's something that we've experienced at some point in our lives. We have that ability, but sometimes we sort of lose sight of that ability when we experience some sort of a chaos or some difficult sort of a moment in our lives, and our emotions, stresses, those things pull us away from this ability. So let's think about it for a second. Have we ever heard the term mind your fall, mind where you're walking, mind your business? Yeah, we've heard these sayings before, and it simply means to be able to pay attention. Pay attention to where you're walking. Walk mindfully so that you don't fall. Pay attention to where you're walking so that, if our mind is far, we're not paying attention where we're walking, we can easily stumble. So it reminds us to be able to simply pay attention to what we're doing in the moment. And even when we think about, mind your business, it means to pay attention to our own business so that we don't stray and we don't get caught up in what other people are doing, but we're able to reconnect to ourselves. Another nice example of mindfulness is that experience that we sometimes have when we're tuned into something. So for example, when our favorite song comes on the radio and we really, really like this song and it's easy to tune in, we feel the rhythm, we start to perhaps dance, we start to sing it, and we're really, really one and in tune with that experience. That is mindfulness in action. When we're eating our favorite food and our ability to just connect with that food. It's tasting really great, and we're able to really experience that moment of eating that food. We're tasting it, we're seeing the colors, we're perhaps feeling the textures in our fingers, the taste in our mouth as well, and we're really in tune with that, and we really, really enjoy that. That is mindfulness in action. When we're even having a really good conversation with someone, we're able to tune in to that conversation. We're listening intently. we're giving feedback, we're receiving in terms of what this person has to say, we have that nice vibe going. That is mindfulness in action. So we're not unfamiliar with mindfulness. We experience this ever so often, but usually in positive moments. The point of this, of remembering or sort of reminding us, is that we want to be able to practice mindfulness, and so that we know in times when we're experiencing chaos, when we're experiencing stress, that with that practice, our body and our system knows how to do it so that it could begin to recreate that stillness in our mind, recreate that stillness in our emotions, and to be able to find back our balance when that happens. Next one. All right, so we have a nice image here. And this image, if we really look at it closely, we have two persons in this image. We have the adult, who there's a lot of thoughts in this adult's mind. So thinking about work, what he has to get done, all the things that he has to get done, thinking about finances, about the car, about time, so many things so many pressures of life, so many things that he has to get done. And so his mind is having so many thoughts, working perhaps a mile a minute. And we see the little one who's able to be there. And in her thoughts, she's able to just be in that moment and notice what's going on right there and then in that moment. She's able to stand there and enjoy the mountains, enjoy the sunlight, and just be there. But the adult in this picture is missing that sort of joy and that pleasure and experiencing that stillness, because the mind is all over, is thinking about so many things. His mind is full, but she is experiencing mindfulness. Right. So how do we experience and how do we get to mindfulness and use it as a practice? One of the things that we want to be able to, where we find this and find this ability and rediscover this ability, is through introspection and self-reflection. So I want to just ask us to pause for a second and encourage us to look inward. How often do we pause? How often do we pay attention to our thoughts, our feelings, our internal sensations that we feel? And if we think back in the past, growing up from childhood till now, have there been a lot of experiences? Have there been a lot of experiences that were encouraged to be able to pause, to introspect, to self-reflect? Are we encouraged to self-reflect, or sometimes are we forced through punishment when something bad happens? You know, sometimes we tell children, go stand in the corner and think about what you've done. Go and stare at that wall and think about what you've done. Are we encouraging them to practice that self-reflection, introspection? Or are we waiting for those opportunities to really just, to really enforce that go and self-reflect more as a punishment than actually as something that can really help this child and guide this child? So sometimes we want to be able to pause and think about, are we encouraging this self-reflection? Are we encouraging this introspection in meaningful ways rather than using it as a punishment? When I look around, I think I see so many instances where young people, or even when we reflect back, we don't have a lot of encouragement to pause and to do that self-reflection. It's all about all the expectations. So you need to go and study a book, pick up a book, go and do your schoolwork, you have chores to do, you have this to do, you have that to do. But when do we get a chance to just pause and just do some self-reflection? Look at, how am I feeling in this moment? What perhaps led to this feeling? Was there a situation in the past, just recently, or perhaps in the distant past? What's going on with my body? Am I experiencing any pains? Am I experiencing anything in my body? Am I able to do that, or am I constantly distracted? it's easy to look externally through sight, and so we see things in the external world. We hear things in the external world, and it's very easy to get caught up with the external world and oftentimes forget to check in with our inner worlds. The reality is that our experience of the world is based on how we perceive and interpret our experiences. How we're thinking about those experiences is going to guide how we actually experience it. So if we think about it for a second, if I think that, gosh, this is such a terrible day, the weather is so hot, it's a bad day, nothing is good enough, that's going to be our experience. But if I'm able to just pause and just kind of think, gosh, it's a hot day, but the sun is nice and out, so we're going to get some good vegetables in the market this weekend, versus, perhaps when it's too rainy. That's going to be our experiences, and our experiences are going to be based on how we think. The internal things that are happening in our internal world. When we have a thought, that's going to bring up a particular feeling. And when we have that feeling or that emotion, it's going to send chemicals through our body to be able to activate the entire nervous system and the entire body to have that experience. And oftentimes we may not be doing a lot, but if our mind is full and we're thinking and constantly creating thoughts, we're going to be having so many emotional experiences that we don't even recognize. And at the end of the day, we're going to feel exhausted and we have no clue why. We didn't do a lot today, but it's happening in the mind. The mind is a very powerful part of us. So to be able to manage our emotions and our experiences, it means that we have to be able to manage our internal world. It means that we have to be able to manage our mind, first and foremost. Yeah? So we have this nice diagram up here. It's a nice Venn diagram. And let me ask you to go on this journey with me. Now, to be able to manage our mind, have we ever paused to think about how our mind works? Yeah, sometimes we know that it creates thoughts, but do we sometimes think about what influences it, what makes me think in this particular way, what's going on internally, what's making our mind think in particular ways? And so this diagram here, it allows us to kind of help us with understanding our mind. So we can be in one of three states of mind, meaning that we can be reasoning in one of three ways. One way that we know is our reasonable mind when we're thinking logically. We're thinking based on facts. We're thinking based on research. We're thinking based on experiences. It's the logical side of the mind. And for example, when we're baking a cake and we're following a step-by-step instructions, we're in our reasonable mind. We're guided by that logic. We're guided by that sort of a problem-solving and decision-making. At another point, we can be thinking based on our emotions. So what that means is based on how I'm feeling, that is giving material in terms of, for my mind to be able to interpret how it's experiencing the world right now. So if I'm angry, that may kind of fuel thoughts in that moment. So if I came home after a long day, I'm really tired, I'm angry, somebody really, really got me angry. I came home and I saw a dirty cup on my favorite book. If I'm angry, the thoughts might be, who left this cup here on my book? You all have no regard for me or my feelings. Why you always do this to me? It will guide how I think in that moment. But if I came home after having a really good day and I'm really happy, I might just simply look at the cup and say, well, it's a dirty cup. You know what? They probably didn't mean anything by it. I'll just put it in the sink, I'll wash it up. No big deal. And I move on with my life. So sometimes we can be in that reasonable mind, sometimes we may be in that emotional mind. And it's important for us to pause ever so often to recognize what's going on in my mind, what's guiding the way that I reason and I think. Now, neither one is better than the other. Both are very important for our existence. Sometimes we do need to think logically, but we also need to be able to look at the abstract world, and our emotions helps us to do that. So not everything may be very clear-cut, but our emotional mind will help us to be able to to pick up on sometimes the very subtle cues, the very abstract kinds of things that the patterns that we may not be seeing very clearly. Now, sometimes we may be in one of the extremes, and we want to be able to recognize if I'm in my emotional mind and it's not very helping me, it's being very harmful to me, or if I'm overly in my reasonable mind, I'm thinking too logical, and I'm not being able to, and I'm really missing a lot of the other important aspects of life. So what we can do is we can operate from this third state of mind called the wise mind. The wise mind is a combination of both factors. So I'm able to step back and look at, well, what are the facts? What are the logic? But it also helps me to step back and look at, well, what am I also kind of feeling? When I'm able to put all of that into play, I'm going to be able to really make good, solid decisions and more effective decisions in terms of what is going to be needed. So, for example, I know I have to study for an exam, and I'm going to set three hours in the evening or whatnot to do that. Come home from work tired and exhausting. It's one of my longest days, and I'm trying to force myself to go and get through that 3 hours, because that's the logical thing to do. I have to be able to put this work in today and every other day. But if I don't consider, well, I'm going to be really tired and exhausted, am I really going to pay attention when I actually go to do that 3 hours when I'm really exhausted? Or perhaps I might consider I'm really tired, and perhaps what I need to do is to be able to say, okay, well, maybe if I take an hour rest, I might be able to focus a lot more. And so that helps us. So when we're able to kind of balance the emotional mind with the reasonable mind, I'm able to operate from the wise mind. So right now, I'm just going to pause us for a second, and we're going to do a little exercise. It's a mindfulness exercise it's a body scan mindfulness. Simply put, it's just being able to focus our attention on our bodies, on different parts of our bodies, and just simply notice if there's any pain, any discomfort, whatever is going on in our body. Before we do that, let's go straight into it. So the introduction to this is that it's just about simply noticing your body. It's not necessarily relaxing your body, but this sometimes occurs. It's simply about being aware of your body in this present moment. Usually our response to bodily pain or discomfort is to distract ourselves and to try and numb the pain. In this exercise, we're going to accept and notice with gentle curiosity our body in its comfort and discomfort. So I'm just going to ask, wherever you are, just sitting in a comfortable position, or if you're at home, perhaps kind of lying down, or wherever you're at. I'm going to ask you to just be in that position. I'm going to ask you to, starting with your feet, pay attention to the physical feelings in them. Any pain, discomfort, coolness, warmth, tension, tightness, whatever. Simply pay attention to the physical feelings and sensations. Don't judge them as good or bad. Don't try to change them. Just be aware of them. And I'm going to ask you to slowly allow your awareness to drift up from your feet to your lower legs, simply paying attention to any physical sensations in that part of your body, including any tightness, pain, or discomfort. And then slowly letting your awareness drift further up your body, doing the same gentle noticing for the other parts of your body, your upper legs, your hips, your buttocks, pelvic region, drifting slowly up to our stomach, chest, your lower back, upper back, fingers and hands. We're moving to our lower arms, upper arms, shoulders, moving on to our neck, your head, your forehead, your temples, moving your awareness to your face, your eyes, cheeks, nose, mouth, and jawline. And I'm going to ask you to let your awareness drift gently and slowly back down your body, noticing any other places where there is pain, discomfort, or tension, and simply noticing this until your awareness settles back at your feet. And as your awareness settles back at your feet, I'm going to invite you to bring your awareness back to this space. I would usually ask, but I'll ask you to ask yourself, what did you notice in that exercise? Were there any pains? Were there discomfort that you noticed? Perhaps you weren't paying attention before. You know it was there, but you didn't really notice it for a while. Yeah? There's some tension, there's some tightness that was happening there, but I haven't probably paid attention to it maybe for weeks. Perhaps I recognized I didn't realize how tired I am. You know, today was a long day, it's been a long week, and I haven't really taken that time to just pause and just to connect with my body and just notice what is happening. What is the body telling me? What does the body need? Much less for the other parts of my system. So mindfulness helps us to be able to practically just pay attention, to be alert to these things that's happening right here and now in this moment. So two things that helps us with. It helps us being able to tune into things that makes me calm. It can help me to tune my mind, tune into and pay attention to things that empower me. It can allow me to tune into pleasant experiences and sensations. It allows me to tune into my needs, perhaps my physical needs, my emotional needs, my mental needs. It allows me to tune into positive thoughts and positive thinking. Mindfulness also gives us the ability to tune out of things that are harmful and unhelpful, things that are unpleasant or that overwhelms me, like certain emotions, painful experiences, and even negative thinking patterns. And it helps us to do that in such a gentle way that we're not fighting with ourselves. Oftentimes when we're trying to tune into something positive, that nice music on the radio, I might be pushing away, trying to use that to push away other thoughts and fight with my thoughts about perhaps I might be negatively thinking about things. And oftentimes we're creating that inner struggle. We're kind of really fighting with ourselves that we don't always know. But mindfulness is about doing it in a way that's gentle. And it's doing it in a way that's non-judgmental and gentle. And the aim is that we can redevelop and develop such a nice, compassionate relationship with ourselves so that we could take care of ourselves to be able to better serve others, to be able to have a better spiritual experience as well. Because we know when we're not well, when we're tired, when we're upset, it makes it really difficult to really tune in and to have really great, nice spiritual experiences, to just be able to kind of feel balanced and to be able to do a lot more and in much more meaningful kind of ways. So mindfulness helps us to healthily tune out of unhelpful things in my mind or experiences or emotions. And it also helps us to tune into things that are going to actually be more positive for me. And I get to make that choice. But to make that choice, I need to be aware of what's going on in that moment. Thinking is like breathing. Do we pay attention to our breathing? Not really. We wait for something to happen to our breathing, then to pay attention. And then we're really in sort of a panic at that moment because that is necessary for my survival. So let's not wait for things to become necessary for our survival and to survive, then to pay attention. Yeah? So we're able to pause, to check in, to notice, to pay attention, and so that we get to make that choice. Can we tune into some, are we Are we tuned into something negative that's really disrupting my thoughts, my mind, this entire experience? Is that helpful to me? Perhaps I need a break from it until I sort of work it out. And perhaps maybe that break might allow me to healthily tune out of that experience, tune into something that's pleasant, so that I give my system a chance to breathe, to relax, to let the body process some of those stress chemicals in it, so that we could go back on to maybe processing, maybe trying to figure things out as well. But we need those breaks, and it's really important. Otherwise, if it keeps continuing and it's perpetual, it's cycling and cycling, it's creating more and more stress chemicals. And after a while, the body thinks that that's normal and it will just produce it, even despite having any actual stressor. So, how do we practice mindfulness? How do we make mindfulness practical? So what do we do? So we need to definitely pause for a pause. Pause, step back in your mind for a second, and just simply observe. I might observe what is happening externally using all my 5 senses. What's going on around me? What am I seeing? What am I hearing? Is there something that I'm tasting, smelling? Using all my 5 senses in that moment. And I can also pause and observe what is happening internally. What's my thoughts? What's going through my mind right now? What's going through my emotional system? What am I feeling like? What's these emotions? And if I can't find a name for the emotion, I might be able to try to figure out, I may be able to try to kind of just describe what it feels like until I find the name for that feeling. And also, what's happening, what am I feeling in my body, just like the body scan we just did. What's going through my behaviors, what's going on in my body. When we observe, we also want to be able to describe it. Put words on the experience. Say it to myself in that moment. So I'm pausing, and I'm simply noticing, well, these thoughts are going through my mind. This is what I'm feeling. And when I feel this way, I'm feeling this tension in this body part, I'm feeling this pain or this discomfort here or there. When I describe it to myself, it's almost like I'm talking to all my systems, and everybody is kind of aware of what's going on, so that we could all make a nice decision in terms of what perhaps might be needed. So when I may look at it from the angle of, what am I feeling right now? Did something trigger this feeling? Did something happen earlier in the day, just now, a couple days ago? So what's the situation? And then I can look at what was all the thoughts that went through my mind in that moment. And when I'm noticing that, I'm also noticing what is this experience like in my body as well. Tension, pain, any physical sensations as well. That goes with the emotions. And when I describe it, I'm more aware of what is going on in that moment. So if I'm aware of it and I understand it, it's easy for me to change or do the necessary to find back my balance. Yeah. So we just looked at what we do, and now we're looking at how do we do those things? How do we observe and how do we describe? So we want to be able to take a non-judgmental stance. When I'm observing, I'm doing it non-judgmentally. I'm being curious. I'm not judging. I'm not trying to analyze the situation. I'm not looking at it, whether it's good or bad. It should have been this way. It should not have been that way. I just want to be able to just simply notice, without judgment, what was happening. And I'm going to describe it in that non-judgmental way. If you do find yourself judging yourself for doing that, for judging the experience, let's just pause and let's just go back to just being curious and just kind of notice what we're perhaps kind of doing. Now, oftentimes when we start to go in the good and the bad and we start to evaluate, that's where the fight comes in to play, that internal struggle comes in. Because that could bring up feelings of guilt and shame and those things that's not going to help us to progress or to be able to figure out what is actually needed for me to kind of improve on what I'm trying to improve. And we want to be able to do things mindfully, which means that we want to be able to begin practicing, can I do one thing at a time with your attention before switching to another. I mean, we can't quite eat a meal and brush our teeth at the same time. That's not going to make a lot of sense. When we're trying to eat, though, we may be thinking about what I have to do for the next day or what went on the other day. My mind might be, taking me to any and every way. And that's going to, the experience of eating and mindfully eating and experiencing that pleasant moment is going to pass by. And I'm going to be caught up in my thoughts, which perhaps may happen for the whole day. And I'm thinking, gosh, why am I not having any good experiences? It's because I'm missing them. That's happening all around me. Just as simple as connecting to my breath and breathing in this moment could be such an anchor to me in this moment that I can experience that calm, that relaxation that I actually need. I don't need to go to necessarily a spa. No, we can go to a spa. But sometimes, let's say in the middle of a difficult conversation, I can't run away to the spa right there and then. But there are things internally that I can tap into to find that inner peace and that stillness and that sense of calm. We all know, let's say when we were children at some point, let's say teenage years, that we all found that ability to zone out. So somebody is telling us, somebody is nagging us and quarreling with us, and we would zone out and be thinking about something else. Something in the distance, something right over their shoulders. We might be singing a song in our minds. And so sometimes it's necessary to do that as adults as well. If that is really not helpful, if I'm not getting actual feedback or good feedback, helpful feedback, then am I just going to clutter my mind with unnecessary, unhelpful sort of opinions and thoughts and those things that, that's just not going to help us. So I'm going to jump to a little bit. So we just explored in terms of making mindfulness practical. And it's as simple as pausing, observing, describing in a non-judgmental way, and trying to practice being one mindfully, being, really trying to practice doing one thing with all your attention from moment to moment. I mean, the world doesn't encourage us to do that anymore. We have so many responsibilities, so many expectations that we're constantly juggling so many things. And we wonder, why are we in this rat race? Where is this rat race leading us to? And we're missing all of the beautiful experiences that God has put here for us to be able to experience. And, it really takes us away from enjoying the journey. Yeah? So I'm just going to look real quick at some benefits and some considerations. Some benefits of practicing mindfulness, and it is a practice. So the more we practice something is the more that it becomes more and more natural to us. Now we have the ability to be mindful, but somewhere along the journey we've lost sight of that. We've forgotten how to do that. But it's there and it's within us. So by practicing, just pausing for a second or two, just observing, describing, and we could look at there's so many resources online as well that we could look at in terms of mindfulness exercises that could help us to practice it, so that when I practice it and it's stored almost like in my muscle memory, those challenging times when I really, really need to do it, my system knows how to do it. And it could very easily just go into that mode and be able to tap into that and go straight in today. But if I'm not practicing it, and I'm in a challenging and a really difficult position, my mind isn't going to take me today. Because at that point, it's just about survival. It's just about doing whatever is necessary just to get by. And a lot of the time in this world, we're not living amongst lions and tigers anymore. And so there's not always sometimes external threats. But we're having these negative experiences. And that tells us we need to look at our mind. If it's not external, we need to look internally. So some of the benefits of mindfulness is that it helps us to keep a balance of logic and emotion as we operate from wise mind. It helps us to keep the parts of the brain for problem solving and decision making online when we're becoming emotionally hijacked. What that means is that when we're becoming emotionally hijacked, or an emotion intensity is increasing and increasing, we have a threshold that when it crosses that threshold, the emotional system hijacks the system, and the part for problem solving and decision making, big word for that is the prefrontal cortex. We see a lot less activity in there. It goes almost offline. So when we practice mindfulness, it helps us to be able to activate a lot more activity in that prefrontal cortex so we could keep that balance. We could keep ourselves in check. We could, even if we're having an emotion, we're not impulsively reacting, but we can pause, we can find a healthier way to be able to express that emotion, and so that we're able to express it and to also be able to see what is necessary so that I don't do regrettable behaviors and then trying to sort of kind of, which is going to even create a lot more stress for me. Another benefit is that it allows us to experience more satisfying experiences. We all look around and see and experience the world as to be so negative. There's so many things going wrong with this world. But there's also at the same time so many things going right with this world. And so we just have to pause and be able to choose what is our focus and notice what we need to be able to do. There is time to advocate for better. There's also time that I also need to take care of myself as well. Mindfulness helps us to increase our emotional intelligence, and thereby it also helps us to increase our resilience as well. Now, mindfulness can be practiced anywhere, anytime. We don't need any special equipment for it. We don't need calming and soothing music to practice it. We could simply just pause and focus on something that's calming in this moment. And we'll practice real quick, very simple and a brief breathing mindfulness in a second. So let's just look at some other considerations. Right? So the more we practice it, the more natural it becomes. As we manage our mind and our emotions, we become less distracted and more focused. And it also aids to improve our prayer and spirituality as we enjoy our connection with God. It's really difficult to connect and to really connect, to be able to connect when there's so much chaos internally. When we're in survival mode, it just keeps drawing us there. I have to figure this out and I have to figure that out. I can't focus. My brain is not allowing me to focus right now because I'm just trying to be able to survive in that moment. So when we're able to find that balance, it really allows us to balance, to anchor ourselves so that we can improve our prayer and our spirituality as well. So I'm going to ask us to do another little mindfulness exercise, and this one is a simple one where we just connect to this thing in this present moment, which is our breath and our breathing. There's so many breathing techniques out there, and quite often it helps us to be able to relax. Now, we're not going to do anything with our breathing. We're just going to be able to focus on it. We're going to be able to pay attention to it. So allow me to ask you to just kind of, wherever you are, to just allow yourself to just perhaps just be grounded in that spot. If you're sitting, you're standing, you're lying down, just feel grounded in that spot. Allow your hands perhaps to be in your lap if you're sitting, and allow yourself to feel centered. And I'm going to ask you to bring all your attention and all your focus to the physical act of breathing. Start to notice the breath as it enters your body through your nose and travels to your lungs. Notice with curiosity whether the inward and outward breaths are cool or warm, and notice where the breath travels as it enters and departs. Notice the breath as your lungs relax and as you inhale through your nose. Don't try to do anything with your breathing, just simply notice it, pay attention to it, and be aware of it. It doesn't matter if your breathing is slow or fast, deep or shallow. It just is what it is. Allow your body to do what it naturally does. You will start to notice that each time you breathe in, your diaphragm or stomach will expand, and each time you breathe out, your diaphragm or stomach will relax. Again, don't try to do anything. Just be aware of the physical sensations of breathing in and breathing out. If you find that thoughts intrude, this is okay. Don't worry, just notice the thoughts, allow them to be, and gently bring your awareness back to your breath. Allow yourself to just notice your breath and your breathing for a few moments. And when you're ready, bring your awareness and your attention back to this space. Alright, so I'm going to pause here. Let me ask if you guys have any questions. Please put them into the comments. We have a few minutes left. But I want to thank you guys for being here, being attentive. And I really appreciate this moment with you guys. So I'm going to ask as well if there's any questions. Also pause here and it's a sort of a nice psalm that I kind of came across, and it says to be still and know that I am God. And it's just a reminder in terms of that sometimes we do need to pay attention and to practice, to be able to return to our stillness. And mindfulness helps us to be able to do that. Mindfulness, it really helps us to be able to find that balance, to rebalance, and to be able to experience that peace. All right. So I don't have any questions, but feel free if you do have any, you can put it in. So the simplest definition that we have for mindfulness is the art of paying attention on purpose to the present moment. Yeah? And it kind of really speaks to, again, noticing what our focus is on in that moment. Being able to guide ourselves, recognize what our attention is, and to be able to focus the mind, to be able to choose our focus. Yeah. There's a lot of nice things in the present moment that we can very easily sort of ground ourselves in, and simple breathing. We can just ground ourselves using our 5 senses, just notice something in this moment, at least with one thing in each sense organ. What am I seeing right now? What am I feeling against my skin? Am I tasting anything? Am I smelling anything? Am I hearing anything? And just allow yourself to just tune into one at a time to something in this moment. We can also kind of choose to do a daily practice as well on it. And so we could create a nice mindful little strategy as we come home. We want to wind down. Could create a nice little space. We have a nice little scented candle we may light and just focus on the flame in that moment, what it smells like. When we're having our meals, we can use our 5 senses again to really tune into that experience. When we're taking a walk, we could just have that mindful moment of, the breeze against our skin, the sunlight, whatever is kind of going on in that moment. When we're taking a drive, when we're having conversations, just allow ourselves to be in that present moment. Yeah? That's a good question. So the question is, how can we notice when almost like our thoughts become dangerous to us? The mind is very powerful, and it's the same mind that gets us into trouble. That same mind has to get us out of trouble. So by being able to sort of practice just paying attention to what's going through my mind right now, when I have this feeling, what were all the thoughts that went through my mind? And, if we could kind of even start perhaps kind of journaling it, writing it down, just have a sheet of paper, we're going to kind of discover that even though it may not seem like negative thinking patterns, when I map that out, I'm going to see very subtle ways in which it's negative and how certain ways of thinking is going to really, create a sort of a, if I'm thinking negatively, it's definitely not going to give me a positive experience. So that if I'm feeling like, something about this, I don't feel right, it feels kind of negative, but it doesn't seem like I'm not really thinking about anything negative. But it's sometimes very subtle in there. And so it's helpful when we could write it down, we could start seeing negative thinking patterns. For example, am I engaging in black and white thinking? Am I looking at, having this dichotomous thinking like the extremes? It's either good or it's bad. If it's not good, then it must be bad, without really being able to see all the sort of nice things that in between there, and to find a nice sort of a healthy in between, rather than these dichotomies that we think in, these extremes that we think in. Sometimes we want to be able to step back and be able to recognize, I'm thinking, gosh, if it's not this, if it's not all of this, then it must be nothing. But am I able to step back and recognize, well, hold on. It doesn't mean it's nothing. There's all of these other factors in play. There's all of these other things as well. Or am I magnifying the situation? Am I noticing I'm having a huge experience for this little thing that happened? And I could look at my mind to kind of think, well, how is my mind interpreting this situation that's perhaps, creating such a huge experience? It's magnifying the situation. Yeah. So I might start to be thinking, gosh, it's the worst thing in the world. But is it really the worst thing in the world? If I look around at news, there's wars going on all over. Is this me not getting my favorite dessert when I go to buy it? Is it actually the worst thing in the world? I'm magnifying it. Sometimes we have the habit of minimizing it. It's actually bigger than we think, but we're always downplaying it. So we also want to be aware of stepping back and kind of looking at, am I magnifying it? Am I actually making it smaller than it actually is? Because I'm having this reaction. It's probably telling me that it's not as simple, it's not as small as I think it is. Perhaps I need to pay more attention to that. So there's so many different little ways in which, we could engage in that sort of negative thinking patterns that's so subtle that we don't pay attention to. Writing it down, we'll find those patterns. Right. So that's a really good question. How can I know when we get to that place when we actually need perhaps professional assistance? Yeah. So generally, just utilizing mindfulness, we're going to be able to pause to kind of discover. And we start with that sort of, just awareness and that understanding. When I pause and I start and I look at, gosh, sometimes my thoughts are overwhelming me. Or I'm noticing that, gosh, I actually really think negatively and I never really realized it. And I'm trying to figure out, well, what is the nice balance? This is where in terms of professional help could kind of come into play. So we'll be able to kind of help, it's difficult to discover those thinking errors or those thought distortions, as we would call it. Let's see, how subtle it might be. And is there a more realistic way of seeing the situation? So I'm not jumping sometimes from negative to just positive thoughts, because I don't want to necessarily jump from negative to being naive. And then that doesn't help me with my survival as well. But at least I'll be able to think about it in a realistic way, slightly towards the positive side. Yeah? So that we're able to figure out how do we transform those subtle negative thinking patterns into more realistic ways of actually seeing and interpreting the world. That's going to be more helpful than unhelpful to me. Yeah, we have this tendency where our mind races off into the future, but it doesn't focus on the positive things in the future. We have this way that our mind would race off and think about all the worst case scenarios that's to come. Yeah, and we're thinking, okay, well, I'm brainstorming, and that is natural for survival, but we need to pay attention that if I'm overdoing it, and it's not really going to be helpful, I could use it to brainstorm and feel prepared, but if I keep doing it, is it going to actually help me, or is it actually going to be more harmful? So we want to pay attention as my mind racing off into the future, but focusing on to the negative aspects that's creating a lot of the anxieties. Is it going to the past, constantly going back to things in the past that was hurtful, maybe 5 minutes, 5 hours, 10 days ago, 20 years ago? My mind keeps going back on those negative experiences, and it's being replayed in my mind, and I don't know what to do with it. We want to be able to recognize when that is happening, because, again, we can be in this moment, thinking about something happened 20 years ago and stimulate the same pain that we experienced 20 years ago in this moment. Our mind could go race to the future and experience all of that anxiety of things that may happen, but chances are maybe 99% it actually doesn't happen. And so we're bringing all of that anxiety into this moment. So our mind has this way of constantly back and forth, and we're really having a difficult time, especially now at this time in this world with technology and everything, with so many distractions, of not being able to live in this moment. What's going on now? What do I need right now? Can I pause to check in what's happening? Can I do a little internal stuck check-in to see what perhaps I kind of need? Yep. Yeah. How do we silence the noise in our mind, those little fleeting thoughts that's perhaps not connected to things in the future, it's not connected to things in the past, but just sometimes these little thoughts that comes into our mind probably surprises us, like, am I really thinking this way? And it scares me to think, does this mean that I'm a bad person? Or not even necessarily a bad thought, yeah. Yeah, it could be these fleeting thoughts. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I wanna put this in a practical way. Now, the job of the mind is to create thoughts. There's at no point that our mind will be completely clear and have no thoughts. Just thinking I should clear my mind is a thought in and of itself. Right? And if we're really holding on to that, that's still holding on to a thought and creating a thought. So we don't want to fight with the mind and pressure it to silence, but what we can do is to take that journey of being aware of it, noticing it, observing it, describing it, but also we can use visuals for this one, where we could almost kind of see these thoughts like clouds in the sky. This cloud just drifted into the sky of my mind. I don't have to cling on to it. I don't have to push it away. I could allow it to just drift through my mind. Yeah, just to pass through. I don't have to hold on to it. I don't have to push it away. But I allow it to leave, and I refocus my mind on what I want to in that moment. So we'll experience more stillness. We'll be able to manage a lot and have a lot less thoughts, but we want to be able to give the mind something to do, to focus on. So, yeah, which is managing the thoughts. So I'm being able to focus my mind from all of the little chatter and the noise or all of those things, and I'm giving my mind something to do because it has to produce thoughts. And perhaps I'm choosing my focus in this moment, might be my breathing, just being in this moment, this thing that I'm eating. It's my prayer time as well, I'm focusing on the words of the prayer, that connection that I have with God, and just being in that moment and allowing myself to notice what I'm also feeling as I have these thoughts through my prayer. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So how do we manage those intrusive thoughts? Those thoughts that come in, it surprises us, it scares us. We wonder where on earth are these thoughts coming from? How do we practice that, you're saying discernment? How do we practice that discernment in terms of being able to, I guess, choose our thoughts wisely, perhaps? I can imagine. Yeah. So, again, I want to go back to that same last example where let's not be afraid of our thoughts. Sometimes a thought is just a thought. Sometimes we don't know where it's coming from, but sometimes a thought is just a thought. And so if the more we fight with it, we think, oh gosh, this thought comes in and it scares me, and I fight back or I run away from it, it's not going to go anywhere. But if I can observe it and describe it simply by being able to, this thought just came into my mind, and I noticed it kind of scared me a little bit. I had these thoughts, gosh, well, what does this mean? Am I a bad person? And if I just observe that, describe it, and remind myself, sometimes a thought is just a thought. I don't have to cling to it. I don't have to push it away. I can allow it to slip right out of my mind as easily as it slipped in. And I could choose in terms of what I'm refocusing my mind back. And the more times we practice that, and even if I have to do it 1,000 times in a minute, over time I'm going to be doing it less and less. I'm going to be able to get my mind to cooperate because, again, I'm not fighting with my mind, so it has to fight back. But it's going to cooperate a lot more, and we develop that healthier relationship with ourselves and our systems. So, as you're saying, even if you don't give it birth, you don't have to give it life, right? So even though it starts, we don't have to give it life. We give it life by fighting with it, by clinging to it, and we give it power when we start to do the fight with it. But we could just simply this word, it's an interesting thing, but there's a power to acceptance. And if we could simply, and mindfulness helps us how to be able to really accept life as it is, not fight with it, because I could kind of think, well, it shouldn't be this way, it shouldn't be that way, but the fact is, it is this way. And so we want to be able to, not fight with it, so that, it could cooperate with us, and it could really kind of work with us in that way. Yeah. Yeah. So You're saying in terms of, when you think about acceptance, it sparks this thought that what and who we accept ourselves to be, that's going to be our experience. And sometimes we do need to pause and to be able to look at, what do I believe about myself? What do I know to be true about myself? Sometimes we have to discern in terms of our opinions versus the facts as well. Because sometimes opinions looks like facts. But opinions are sometimes just thoughts, based on our feeling. Perhaps we were in our emotional mind when we created some of those thoughts. But we want to be able to step back and be able to look at, well, how do I think about myself? What do I believe true to be about myself? And allow myself to go on that journey of recognizing, what do I understand about myself and believe in myself? Because when I accept those beliefs, it becomes my reality. So if I believe I'm a bad person, guess what's going to happen in my behaviors? I'm going to constantly be acting in a bad way. I'm going to always have that self-fulfilling prophecy. If I believe I'm a good person, I want to be able to go on that journey of looking at my behaviors, learning, growing, and keep continually being a good person as well. So I like that question. We do need to kind of have that. And this is where the reflections and the introspection helps us. To pause and to ever so often, on a daily basis, but sometimes we could do it on a quarterly basis, to just have a little self-retreat with ourselves. Go somewhere and just be able to just be with our thoughts. Look at what are my dreams, who I know myself to be. Is there anything that I want to improve on myself? But also, I want to also notice my strengths as well. I want to keep that balance. Yeah? So thank you very much. I think we're out of time. Great. So if anybody needs any assistance or want more information, or recognize that perhaps they also need some assistance through this journey, our information is up there as well, I believe. And so you can reach out to us. Yeah. So our number is 708-6565. All right. Thank you very much, and you guys have a good evening. Yeah.
We just want to thank Kishan. I thought with 3 persons here we were very good. I gained so much this evening. I learned a lot, and I want to say how good you were. We want you to come back. I think there's so much more on this particular mindfulness that we need to do. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the technical people, and we will be back. We will be back. So we say, Father, we just thank you, and we say, God bless us as we go. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all.